Well, could Kraven the Hunter spell the end for Sony's Spider Man Universe? Actually, it should be called Sony's Spider Man-less universe because Spider-Man has never appeared. Yeah, after multiple flops and some mediocre success, we are hearing reports that Sony might actually be done with some of these villain-based Spider-Man movies, and it could mean a lot for the future of the wall crawler. Let's take a couple of minutes to talk about what's going on, where we're hearing this report from, and what it could mean for the future of Spider-Man. Well, when Sony initially set out on making some of these new films focused on Spider-Man villains, people were pretty optimistic. They came out of the gate with the first Venom film, which has been the most successful film in the Sony Spider Man universe. Now, since then, it's been, well, quite the up and down ride. And Venom Let There Be Carnage both did okay, but the second film had some diminishing returns, and that was followed up by a series which can only be equated as absolute flops in the form of Morbius and Madam Web. Now, this year's Venom The Last Dance did do a bit better, but keeping it in perspective, this particular film did less than its predecessor, and the Venom franchise has been not only a diminishing return, but quite honestly, these numbers would not be considered a bang-up success, except the other Sony movies have done so bad. Now, we're right around the corner from Kraven the Hunter, and that film is also tracking very, very poorly for its opening weekend, and Sony could have another $100 million box office on their hands, meaning this film could likely fall right in the same bucket with Madam Web and Morbius and be a colossal flop. Now, many fans have been asking for a while, what is Sony doing? And it seems like at this point we might be reaching the end of the road. Now, I've seen a couple of reports, specifically from Heroic Hollywood, that are suggesting that Kraven the Hunter will be the last effort from Sony when it comes to this villainous Spider-Man universe. Now, this hasn't been confirmed by Sony or Tom Rothman or anybody directly involved in those Spider-Man projects, but when you look at how unsuccessful many of these projects have been and their return on investment, well, you kind of understand the logic. At this point, we are hearing about no other Sony Spider-Man movies. Notice we've got no new announcements for villain movies, we've got the animated film coming up and a couple of things over on Amazon, but as things stand right now, it looks like these Sony Spider-Man movies, at least from a theatrical perspective, are kind of coming to an end of the road, at least based on their plans. Also consider the possibilities that Marvel Studios is right around the corner from Secret Wars, and that relationship between Marvel and Sony has been much more lucrative for Sony. The last Spider-Man movie was Sony Pictures' highest grossing movie of all time, and they want to repeat those numbers. And when you compare that movie with, say, the likes of Morbius and Madam Web, well, you can very quickly start to understand that it seems like at this point, based on the output and the success level, that Sony's return on investment is going to be much better if they just saddle up with Marvel Studios. Now, we're right around the corner from the conclusion of the multiverse saga, and we have been hearing for a while that Sony is going to roll their Spider-Man properties up into Marvel Studios proper, and future Spider-Man-oriented films will come directly from Marvel and not from Sony. This means that there's a strong possibility that after Secret Wars, many of these Spider-Man villains that were unavailable to Marvel will now be on the menu. Now, this could lead to all kinds of interesting story possibilities, probably none bigger than Norman Osborn coming into the MCU and taking up many roles even beyond being the Green Goblin. Now, all of this we really have no confirmation of right now, and we don't know what Marvel is going to do post-Secret Wars. What we're hearing about is a soft reboot, which would allow Marvel and Sony to kind of renegotiate things and fold a lot of these properties into Marvel proper. Now, does this mean that Tom Hardy is going to show up in the MCU as Venom or Jared Leto as Morbius? I don't know at this point. It is a possibility, assuming Marvel has space on their schedule for those Sony projects. Marvel and Sony have a pretty good relationship right now, and both parties are making money, and Sony is clearly not making money on their own. So I do think there's a great path moving forward for both parties, and it could give Spider-Man fans a much more integrated Spider-Man universe. Obviously, the events of Secret Wars in the next couple of years really matter. Kraven could also be a massive hit and make Sony change their mind, but I think at this point, even beyond some of the reports that we're hearing, which none of them are confirmed, Sony's gonna have to make some calls on getting these movies right. They're not getting the work done, and Marvel Studios can quickly grab the reins, run with it, and put capital in their pocket, which quite honestly is something Sony needs because they have had a string of films that have not only underperformed, but many of them have out and out flopped, and the studio has been teetering on the edge for several years, and if this continues, well, I guess you have to think about the possibilities of Sony Pictures going away completely or selling off Columbia to some other studio. Now, obviously, none of this has been confirmed as of yet, but the writing seems to be on the wall, and I think Sony will definitely be making some big changes in the future. Their best chances for profit are with Marvel, and if they continue down this path, well, the changes are going to come anyway, and they just won't be in the driver's seat. How it works out, we're going to have to wait and see. Now, before you take off, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, ring that bell for all the updates, and make sure you get every notification because we do daily Marvel and DC content and we don't want you to miss any news.